podcast where we want to help your family have better conversations around the content you consume. My name is Nathan, and welcome to episode 50. This is a big deal around here. One, because that means we're just around the corner from having done this podcast for a whole year, and also because when I first started having the conversations about this podcast, I didn't know if we'd make it to episode 15. So making it to episode 50, it's kind of fun, and we know we have several of you that are downloading this every week. I have no idea if anyone is actually listening to it, but I know it's being downloaded, and there are views on YouTube. So we are very excited. But of course, let me go ahead and introduce our co-host. As always, the hero of our podcast, Donnie Dorsey. You're 50 and you like to kick.
That's right. That's right. Like if this was years, we'd be really close to AARP, and we could get those benefits of those 50%, 15% off.
That's right.
At your local IHOPs.
That's
I'm
right.
here for it.
I'm all good for that. What's the SNL character? It's like, I'm 50. I like to stretch. I like to kick. I don't know what that is. All right. Of course, the villain of our podcast, curmudgeonly 50, Sawyer Hewlett. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm excited for this episode. This is going to be like almost like a fun episode. Not that the other episodes aren't fun, because they're always fun, but this one's like going to be kind of all over the place, which is more of my energy. So
yeah, this does feel very much like a Sawyer episode. I'm feeling a little anxious, but I'm glad. We don't have much of a plan, so I feel a little anxious of where we're going, but that's okay because we have the calm, soothing presence of the mom of the podcast, Heidi Cooper. How are you doing?
I am good. 50 feels great. It's the new 40, right?
That's right. There you go. For Sawyer, it's the new 70. So
yeah.
I was about to say,
Sawyer,
just
you
wait
were
for 100,
say,
guys.
Yeah, you were supposed to say cold and your joints were aching or something like that.
Yeah,
that's right.
Cold.
Well, this is very exciting because for a lot of people, this is not going to be a normal episode for us. We still hope we're going to have a conversation that is going to be beneficial for you and your family. But we're not discussing any one particular movie. We're not even really discussing one particular theme. We are just like every good teenager celebrating every possible anniversary, not understanding that Anna in anniversary is annual, and so they say I have a 3-week anniversary, which is actually makes absolutely no sense. You can't have a 3-week 1-year anniversary. So but they still are holding on to that. We are celebrating everything we possibly can, and we're celebrating 50 instead of 100. So that's the youth of us celebrating it. And we just want to talk about a little bit about, one, why we do this podcast, and maybe some good memories that we've had from this podcast, and really just try and kind of vision cast if you're kind of new to the podcast and maybe you've listened to a few episodes and you don't really know the heart behind what we're trying to do. We wanted to spend some time talking about that, and then so I just want to start there. We started having conversations about this podcast almost exactly this time last year. I had talked to both Sawyer and Donnie originally. I'd called them both and had a conversation about we were wanting to start a family ministry.
Hold on. By call, you mean walk down the office, okay? You make that sound really
Donnie
professional.
Donnie wasn't.
He beckoned you across. He beckoned you across the hall. He said, "Come in there, Sawyer. Come here."
Sawyer wants a timeline. I texted Donnie and said, "Hey, we're doing a thing." I walked to Sawyer's office and said, "We're doing a thing." Then we had, okay, I'll take it back further than that. I had a thought one day in my bedroom. If you want the whole timeline, the podcast had a meeting that was a video meeting.
The trailer it'll just be a reenactment of all this.
What'd you say?
Just create a reenactment.
He was going to do a thing.
That's right.
He texted Donnie, said, "We're going to do a thing."
Yes, exactly.
He got Sawyer from down the hall. Said, "You're going to be part of our thing."
And previous to that, I had conversations with other people on staff of, "Hey, I'm thinking of doing a thing. Do y'all think that's a good thing?" So all of those things happened. I got Sawyer in a meeting. I got Donnie in a meeting. It was a Google Meet. Do y'all remember this meeting?
Yeah.
Vaguely, very vaguely.
I remember the conversation in my office where you said we're going to have a meeting. But
after that, everything else is just blacked out, and he just goes back to the recordings. Go, I did say that.
So anyway, we had a meeting, and we were talking about creating a family ministry podcast, and we're trying to figure out what to do. Because for those, I don't think there's anyone who listens to this who doesn't know about our other podcast, which has been going on for I think we're coming in on 150 on that podcast, and so at that point we were almost at episode 100, and that one we answer a lot of questions. It's our teaching pastors. We answer a lot of questions from the church, and we were like, should the style be? And so I had this idea of, well, one thing we want every family to do is to just have times of connection. We had already had several family game night events where we really try to encourage families to have just regular family game nights to everyone's lives after COVID, kind of, 2021 when we were starting this, everyone was starting to get busy again. And all that kind of family time that happened during the shutdown was starting to kind of go away. And so we as a church were like, well, really important to raising children and students who love Jesus is having families who love Jesus. And that's a part of their routine. And so we said, hey, a family game night would be important. And so we decided, hey, we're going to have a family movie night. We think, hey, families are everyone's watching all different kinds of content. If you got teenagers, I'll tell you this, they're probably not even watching much movies or TV. They're just watching lots of TikTok. They're watching lots of YouTube. And depending on the way your family is structured, if you've got older kids, younger kids, everyone's going 1,000 different directions. And choosing to say, hey, at least once a month, that was kind of our idea. Once a month, you would sit down as a family and have a movie night and watch the same thing together. Phones get put away. Everyone's focused on the same thing. We're watching this movie. And then we said, if we could help them not only do that to build memories and build connection, build relationship, but also choose to say, hey, let's have conversations about the thing that we're watching, that would really be an opportunity for families to be able to talk about Jesus in a way that might be memorable for their kids as you talk about movies. So Donnie, Sawyer, do y'all remember anything about those early meetings where we were just kind of talking about what we kind of dreamed the podcast might look like and those kind of things?
Yeah, I remember
Go ahead, Donnie, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. I mean, I was just going to say, I remember the whole time I was just like, this seems like a fun idea where I'm going to get to watch some really cool movies and have the conversations that I always had with myself almost, or with like one
staring in a mirror back to forth.
I've always been someone who loves trying to find if there is some Jesus that's present in a movie is the thing that's always kind of been, for a long time where my brain goes when I watch a movie. And the idea of getting to have that kind of a conversation on a weekly basis just really, really excited me. And also the idea of getting to talk about it with people who knew what they were talking about with movies as well, because the only other conversations I had like that were with like my parents or my brothers and sister who they like movies, but they don't care about movies and stuff like that. Which I'm not begrudging them or anything. I want to be clear, but the idea of getting to have actual conversations. Yeah, I am. I freaking hate those guys. No. But no, I mean, it was just really exciting. I remember thinking it was just a brilliant idea.
Yeah. Donnie, what about you?
I was going to say, I remember I remember having the conversation and I was like, okay, I knew what we were going to do, but I didn't know how it was going to transform into what it is now. Because it was okay, so we're going to watch some movies and have some chats. And it's then it was just watching it kind of grow into what it was. Cause those first conversations was all right, we're going to watch this movie and then we're going to talk about it. And I'm I don't know if I always have something to offer. And what if it's just awkward silence for a 15 minute episode or something like that? But then seeing that, how we all just kind of started to feed off of each other and just develop that on-screen chemistry of being able to just and how we've created, the roles and the different, titles and the inside jokes and things like that we kind of have created from that. So,
yeah. Well, and I remember in that very first meeting that we had, I had said pretty early on, in this meeting, I said, this is a family movie night podcast. and it's just 3 dudes, and one of them doesn't have kids. And we don't have any women present on the podcast. And so I had originally approached both Donnie and Sawyer, one because Sawyer had only been kind of in his residency with the church for a few months at that point. And one of the things I knew was
less
Sawyer,
than 2.
Yeah, Sawyer loves movies, and so me and him had already had some conversations. I said that'll be easy. Donnie and I mean, we've been friends for over a decade now, and that was most of our conversation. So those 2 were instant for me. And immediately, one of the very first people I said, well, we need to try someone out, but I don't know any moms who are going to want to do every other weekend, because we film every other Saturday. I was like, I don't know any other moms who are going to care enough about this. Do it. And I said, except for maybe Heidi. Like Heidi might do this. So I said, well, let's get started. Let's not wait until we have. So let's get started. And I'll see if I can put Heidi on as a guest host a couple times and kind of trick her into doing it enough. And so, Heidi, do you remember the first episode that you did with us? I have it in case you don't.
Yeah, I think it was Paddington.
It was the Paddington 2 episode.
Because you asked me about Lifetime movies, and I was like, "Nah, dog, I'm good, thanks."
Yeah, that's true. That was the first one. We did the Lifetime one. I said, I don't know if Heidi's into Lifetime movies, but I'll ask her and let's see. But no, you were like, that ain't my jam.
Yeah. In fairness to Heidi, the Lifetime movies episode, I was also like, okay.
I will say, I actually really loved that episode. I was actually going to mention, that as one of my highlights of the podcast. I love that. It was great to have Brandy on that episode. But yeah, I had always kind of thought, Heidi would be fun to do this, because Heidi and I have been friends for also over a decade at this point. And so Donnie and I and Heidi and I, at different hours, did student ministry. And so one hour I'd be sitting there talking to movies and TV shows with Donnie. And then the next one I'd just be talking about random movies and stuff with Heidi as well. So I knew that it would work. What was your first thought kind of coming onto the Paddington episode?
I thought it was a really cool thing, and I really enjoyed it. Right away, I enjoyed it. And I think that the biggest part for me was that I did this with my kids, but never as an intentional or a set thing. It wasn't like a scheduled and all that. But this has created that for us, and I think that's been the reason why it is important, because if I'm missing a little bit of time with them on a Saturday morning to do this podcast, it only means that I took that time and made that,
right.
Yeah. So it helped me to really make the space for that and make it a priority, I guess.
Well, and I think for me, very similar, the reason this movie came to me was, and I've talked about this plenty of times, but my family is a little untraditional in the sense that, I've adopted 3 of my daughters, and when they came into our home right before the pandemic. They came in right now 3 years ago. We had them about 6 months before the pandemic. Well, no, almost 9 months before the pandemic hit. When it happened, we were still just really building a lot of memories and building bonds. And Friday night was our time. That shifted now. It's now Saturday night. Movie nights were kind of they were important to us because I realized how much time I had missed with my kids. And the thing that you get when you're have a 15-year-old in the house, you're like, I've only got 3 years left. I had from the moment they came in, because I was like, I just had missed 7 years of their life. And we needed to almost microwave connection. We need to microwave these. And there's a lot that when you have a baby, I'm singing Jesus Loves Me to you. And slow cooking Jesus into your life. And I realized I need to take every possible moment to talk about my love of Jesus with these kids. I didn't want to be the, and we said this early, I don't know if Sawyer and Donnie remember this in the meeting. I said, I intentionally don't want this to be youth ministry podcast of every youth minister is hey, you know who would sacrifice themselves in a wormhole like Iron Man? Jesus. When we say we're looking for Jesus and everything, we're not making every movie a character as Jesus. Yeah. Movies are not parables. They are not, because they were not made to do that. And when you force that into it, you actually do damage to the way they view movies, because eventually they go, my dad's some weird quack who just thinks every movie is a representation of Jesus, which it's not. And I think we have proved that over this time. But every movie is a conversation about what matters. And it
Yeah.
may be from a perspective I don't agree with. You know, we've been watching the Twilight movies with my girls, and I regularly am saying to them, like, hey, this is not what romance should be like. This is not what like, and like just telling them like, this is not because, but if I let them discover those on their own when they're 19, I don't get the opportunity to have that conversation. But if I have it with them when they're 10 and 11 and we can work that in. So it was really,
Nathan, you don't want an adult man imprinting on one of your child.
no. Yeah. I was like,
What?
yeah.
You don't like bedazzle? You don't like having someone that shines brighter than you?
Yes. Or I'm just like making your entire 18-year-old life about which two boys you have to love or whatever, you know, but whatever. And there's all kinds of movies. I mean, we talked early on. I said one of my goals was I love superhero movies, but I honestly think the way superhero movies are, where it's one strong man beating up everyone else, and that's how we solve the problems of the world, that is a little antithetical to the way of Jesus, which is the way it is to lay down your life. It's not crushing your enemies, it's loving your enemies. And
Oh yeah, like, 'cause I mean, you think about like the examples, like where, you know, like Peter's like, I'm gonna slice his ear off, whoosh, and you're like,
yes,
and then Jesus like, wait, well, hold on.
yes.
That's not what we do here. Okay, sorry, sir. Here you go. There's your ear. All right, we're gonna
Jesus
go back
is,
to work.
I feel like Jesus is like, dude, I got to go to the cross and you've learned nothing. It's like, I got to fix this. But yeah, like 1,000%. I think that was really important. And I thought for families who are more traditional and we kind of lose sight of how every Friday night goes by and it's just a Friday night where everyone's on their phone and not paying attention. If we could become intentional about, hey, let's build memories with our kids. And once again, we're not expecting you to watch every movie we talk about. We don't even care if you watch any of the movies we talk about. What we want is for you to have times where you build connection with your kid and you talk about your love of Jesus. And maybe you're not movie people, and that's okay. Maybe you like just listening to the podcast because the conversations we have, you can apply those to whatever situation. But it is important that you have, as we say, I mean, it's in our script and maybe you fast forward that part, but regular, meaningful times of connection with your kids. That's what matters. Intentional. Yes. Intentionality. So that's really the heart behind this podcast. And we've done 50 episodes and we've had a lot of fun. I think 50 episodes, we have covered well over 50 movies, even with this one where we're not really covering any specific movie. And the first one, we didn't cover any movie, but we've had a bunch where we've covered 4 or 5 movies. So well over 50. And Sawyer, he wanted us to talk about what were some of the favorite movies that we've talked about. So does anyone have a movie that they look back? And here's what we'll make this a twofer. You can answer either or both. A favorite conversation we had or a favorite movie that we covered. So either one, you can answer either or both. So is there a movie that we covered or a conversation that you just really enjoyed? Who's up
I think
first?
for me, one of my first was In the Heights. And
Yeah, that was your second episode.
That movie, I just loved it so much. It it was so well done.
Yeah.
The music was great. The characters were great. But what I liked most about it was it took me back to my childhood, being a Hispanic person who wasn't born here and coming to the States and like seeing how, I talked about it on the podcast, like my dad and the Payless shoes,
Oh, right. Yeah. I remember that conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just talking to my dad's wife yesterday and, she got the new iPhone that came out. And she said that it won't be available until December in Colombia, where we are. And that's just something that we as Americans just don't even think about, you know? So, yeah, I think that was probably it brought a lot of nostalgia for me and fun. So, yeah, I think that was probably one of my favorite movies that we've watched and episodes to just kind of talk about that. Yeah.
I loved our discussion on there, and I think about it regularly because I love that movie. I love that musical. I love everything about it. I think about that movie all the time. My kids have watched it like 3 times since we talked about it at the beginning of 2022. And I still stand by. I think the best character we've ever covered on this podcast is Abuela Claudia. I just think she is so emotional to me. Aspirational to me. And I know she's fictional. Like, it's not even that, but like this idea of being a person that has just given their life to a community and says, I want to make other people's lives better. And, there's really no talk about, I mean, she talks about faith. So we believe she's a person of faith. But even though Jesus is not very specifically, for me, it would be that I could become a person that in my 90s, I had given my life away for the sake of Jesus and for the sake of others. And that it was this blessing that when I died, it would be like that moment where they sing alabanza and they just sing praise to God for this person. Thank God. If God made a person this great, how much greater must he be? Not that they would praise me or praise, Abuela Claudia. They're praising God for coming up with someone as wonderful as this. And it's just those kind of things are just beautiful. And I had that conversation with my kids. And so, yeah, that one really stands out to me. Donnie, any movies or episodes that stand out to you?
There's a couple because, I feel like we've covered a lot of things that, just kind of hit on a lot of different things. There was when we had the Just Mercy episode that we did.
Yeah. Donnie, do you remember the Hidden Figures episode? And it was just me and you.
Yes.
Yes.
And that actually went longer than all the other
Yeah,
ones.
I think it's still our longest episode. It was me and Donnie talking about Hidden Figures. And that is one of my favorites, primarily because Sawyer wasn't there. But
that tracks.
but because, and that was actually, I think before Heidi was an official co-host, that was in that meantime where she was still guest hosting a lot. But yeah, it was one where Sawyer couldn't be on. It was just me and Donnie. But I honestly, I remember that being just a very powerful conversation.
Yeah.
But anyway, what other movies?
That definitely, what was it? The Peanut Butter Falcon.
That was a fun episode.
And what was the other one? I'm trying to think. And I think definitely the In the Heights one. I enjoyed that one as well. We just had, there were so many different topics that we covered that I think were either very eye-opening or gave so many different perspectives because we all saw it from different viewpoints. And I remember having those conversations and going, I never thought of it like that. And then and it's that what Heidi was talking about earlier is that sitting down with the kids and watching these things intentionally and then actually having these conversations with your kids and not and knowing that, okay, when I'm recording this, I've had some intentional time that I know I set aside for us to grow and spend time together. And it's a movie and some people are well, you're just watching a movie. You just want to sit there quiet. But what conversations come out of it are incredible. Sometimes we sit there watching the movie. We're like, there's nothing I'm going to be able to talk. And then the kid, your kid asks you a question, a real deep question. You're like,
or just being able to explain ideas to my kids. When we see something in a movie that they don't understand about the world and being able, they'll be like, what is that? Why does that happen?
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm able to make it spiritual because they'll be like, someone said something about why are they so upset about money or something? So, for a lot of people, they think that their life can't be good if they don't have money, but we know our life can be good no matter what, because God's with it, something like that. Yeah. I would say that's a big part of this is I grew up in a house where you don't talk during movies. We're watching a movie. Why are you talking? But I think especially when you got young kids in the home, how important it is that it is a free flowing conversation. And there's almost and what it feels like is being a part of and you hear about it, oral traditions of these tribes, right? Where they don't have written languages. And as one person's telling a story, other people are contributing and they remember parts of the story. That's what it's like watching with little kids. Cause they're like, oh, this part's about to happen. If they've seen the movie or, oh, I wonder what's going to happen. And that's a joyful part of teaching my kids, hey, let's talk about the story and let's talk about life because the story does matter, but it's not the most important thing.
Yeah. Oh, I'll tell one with my kids, my favorite definitely was My Neighbor Totoro. I never thought my kids would connect with that movie.
Take me away, Totoro.
I never thought they would connect with it so much. And they were like, I want to watch this over and over again. And I was like,
oh man, my kids love Totoro. Yeah,
I love Totoro. Okay,
it's just beautiful. Yeah, we regularly have Ghibli movie marathons at our house. Heidi, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to go back to your point about them talking. I think with my kids, that's been the most enjoyable part about it is that they interrupt, they ask questions,
Yes.
Elena, I love that my daughter has started to, because some of the movies are maybe a little bit over her head, or some parts of them that we watch together. But I love like having them involved. It's not the same experience when they aren't
Yes.
involved, and they look forward to it too. But yeah, that she'll say, "Mommy, can you go back? Can you pause that?" You know, and
Yeah.
then we get to have those conversations. And so I think, like you were saying, you know, you don't talk during movies or whatever. You know, when you were growing up, like that's how it was. And I think that's been probably the most fun part about this, is that I'm like, no, the point is the discussions, not.
Yes.
So let's throw that whole idea out, you know.
Yep.
Yes.
Jackson and I watched a lot of movies when we were my oldest. We watched a lot of movies. I say when we were growing up, because I was 19 when I had him, so it feels kind of like we did it together. But yeah, that was kind of always something, and we loved talking about them afterwards. And so this has been like a perfect fit for me, because now I get to force my other two to do this with me.
That's right. We're doing this. And I think in our culture, it's really hard. I mean, our current culture, when movies are really kind of going out of fashion, in the sense that everyone thinks, oh, everyone's attention span are so short, and, you know, everyone's not. But there is a benefit to, and I think a TV show would be just as good. If you could find a TV show with your family that you could hey, we're all going to sit down, we're all going to watch this. It's the same thing. But I think it's honestly harder. I think TV shows are more segmented than they used to be. And movies still are this thing where they'll most of the movies they make are they're called 4-quadrant films. They're trying to be good for mom, dad, teenagers, little kids. Like they want it to hit every possible demographic. Whereas TV shows, and we were talking about this, my family loves the TV show Blackish, because it's one of the few like family comedies that exist that kids can actually watch. And there are episodes from the kids' perspective. There aren't a lot of like Boy Meets World or Full House or these or Family Matters, like those kind of TGIF movies, shows where they had to have a thing in there for little kids. They had to have a thing in there for teenagers. They had to have a thing. Almost like even Modern Family doesn't work that way for my kids, because the whole thing, it really is more adult humor. It's like the adult point of view, whereas Blackish has a lot of stuff from the kids' point of view.
Yeah, they did a great job with that. Like, because it, like you said, I mean, a lot of times, like it's like you said, it's either one way or another. Like, it's not very segmented to like appeal to all audiences. And like when you're watching that show, you're like, wow, like they had an entire show where the perspective was from the youngest. And like a lot of times it changes how you view it, because, you know, like as an adult, we're like, we got things to do. And your youngest kid is like, I don't care. I just drew a picture. You better look at it.
Yes. Well, and I think what's beneficial for us, at least about movies, is I may not be able to have every night of the week where we can sit down and watch a TV show, but I can have one night a month where we can sit down and all watch the same movie and we all have the same memory.
Yeah.
Sawyer, are there any movies or episodes that really stand out to you as just being fun or meaningful?
I think my favorite conversation that we've all had was definitely the Rush Hour episode. That I had a lot
because of Chris Tucker. Did Chris Tucker reach out to you, Sawyer?
Yeah,
we were our worst to you that day.
Chris Tucker slid into my DMs, and so that was.
That went a different direction than I thought. What was Chris Tucker reaching out to you about?
But that was probably my favorite episode we did. My favorite movie, it's recent. It's probably Coco. It's probably Coco or My Neighbor Totoro. But gosh, Coco is just a cheat code for me.
Well, and you hadn't seen it before then too. I remember that was like,
I had seen it before, but I wasn't paying attention is the thing. I had never intentionally sat down and watched Coco. The only other time that I had seen it, I was at a party and stuff like that. And so this was the first time that I was like, I'm going to watch this movie with intentionality. And I cried 4 times. So
the thing I love about this podcast, as far as just the movies that we watch, is and it may not feel this way to other people, but they're pretty wide ranging. I think most people now don't watch movies that aren't Disney movies and that aren't Marvel movies, which I know are also Disney movies. But, you know, pretty much if it's not Marvel or Disney, and I have that conversation regularly with people, I don't go to the movie theaters if it's not Marvel. And I don't really turn anything on if it's not Marvel. Everything we watch is that. And we've only covered one Marvel movie, and no one watched that episode. So we chose never to do another Marvel movie from that point on. We did Doctor Strange. I did enjoy that episode. But
that was a good one, because we talked about the sacrifice and how he repeatedly sacrificed himself over and over again. I was like, And I was like, that's such a good point.
Yes. And we have watched several Disney movies, but they're often Disney movies most people don't think of. But I think we've covered a lot of movies. Like Mitchell's versus the Machine was one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah.
And just that movie was really good. Here's a Disney one a lot of people don't.
Batman. Lego Batman was one of my
Lego
favorites.
Batman was
Yes.
fun.
That's
That was
probably the
good.
one that me and my kids have watched the most since we watched it for the podcast. That
was so-
became Abel's favorite movie after that podcast.
Yes. I was so happy that we watched Pete's Dragon because I could force you guys to watch it, which is still one of my favorite movies, and I cried during every time. So I will say, out of 50 episodes, I think I've cried 49 times. So I cried. We didn't talk about that in the last week's episode. Before I Wake, I definitely cried at the end of Before I Wake. So, and I think one of my daughters was crying. So that was a fun thing. So. But one of the things was not just the conversations we wanted to have. It really was this idea of building memories and connections. And so as we kind of wrap this up, I wanted every host to kind of talk about what are movies that either with your family or just you personally are really personal to you. Movies have a way of kind of connecting to us in ways because they are windows into other people's perspectives. Sometimes a movie hits us because it's so much our perspective and other people don't even care about that movie, but it's just our perspective, or it gives us a window into someone else's perspective that isn't ours. And we get to live another person's life. I think Roger Ebert's the one who called movies empathy machines. They are movies that make you experience another person's life. And so let's just start there. So I'm really excited to talk first. Well, I'm going to start with Heidi because she mentioned a movie that I loved when I was a kid. And I don't think I've watched in, I don't know, 15 years maybe. So Heidi, what was the movie that you had referenced before?
Pay It Forward. Haley
Yeah.
Joel Osment and Helen Hunt and Kevin Spacey was in that movie.
Yeah.
But it was about a kid who Kevin Spacey's his teacher, Helen Hunt's his mom, and basically they do a social studies experiment, and his is to pay it forward. He comes up with this thing, and the rules of pay it forward, where you do something big for somebody, something they couldn't do for themselves, and then the person who receives that goes then and pays it forward and
To three people.
to three people, and it becomes like this movement, this pay it forward movement. And I think there were so many things. I was a really young woman and young mom, single mom, when I saw the movie. I think my son was probably about 4. It came out in 2000, but I didn't see it until later. But it's about a single mom and her son, and she's making a lot of hard negative choices. She's been
Right.
doing. So I really
Is Helen Hunt in that movie? If I remember correctly, because once I haven't seen it, she's an alcoholic in that movie. If I remember,
she's an
correctly.
alcoholic and in an abusive relationship. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Who's in 6th grade is involved. It's very heavy. It's very, emotional. But I think the thing for me was that the child, like, he was such an amazing human being and just, had
Yeah.
like, such a capacity for like loving and seeing, and I remember seeing that a lot in my son. And so it really just resonated with me. Like I always would say, like, Jackson, his heart, like children, a lot of times you'll see this, like their heart and their nature can be so pure, and just
Yes.
so sweet. And I think that little boy, despite the really tough circumstances, he showed that to his mom. He showed
Yes.
that was the best way to live, to his mom. And, the ultimate storyline behind it is that the pay it forward she's one of the recipients for him. And he shows her basically like what love looks like. And she hadn't experienced that in a healthy way before. And so, yeah, it was just a really cool movie. And for me, it really helped me to see like, gosh, I knew I was an important part of his life, but I think that I didn't realize, necessarily at that point, how every little decision, was affecting and, kind of shaping and molding how his circumstances and his life would be. And yeah, it was just a really good, powerful movie for me.
That was a movie that for me as a kid, I think movies became a big deal. Movies have always been, my parents talk about when I was a kid, I would watch movies and just one of my nieces is apparently this way, just get drawn into them. Like they were like, you couldn't move Nathan from the TV. He would just sit and I would go act him out and play him out. And I remember one of the most formative things was when I was about 11, 12, we got the TV station Encore. It just became free. It was like the one movie channel. We never had HBO or Showtime or any of that stuff, but I would watch Encore and that movie played all the time. And I remember being like 12 around the time that movie came out. And a lot of people at church used it all the time because, Jesus, you can pay it forward what Jesus did for you, which is very biblical. Like, I mean, that's a biblical idea. It one reminds you of what people have done for you. Even in a bad situation, somebody has done something to bless your life. And even if it's just Jesus, right? Jesus is love and forgiveness and mercy and grace. And that's why we forgive. We forgive because we've been forgiven. That's why we are compassionate because God showed us compassion, all that stuff. But I remember for me, particularly as a kid who didn't have that life experience, talking about it being an empathy machine, I remember because of the nature of our church, we have people with all different kinds of past and in all kinds of life situations and really difficult ones. And I had friends who had grown up in homes that were very similar to that. And watching this movie gave me the empathy and the compassion. I never had experienced it, but it allowed me to almost understand another person's experience of going, oh, I could imagine what it was like to not know if your mom was going to come home. Because I remember that was kind of a specific part of that movie, or to have a mom who maybe not is sober every day. Yeah. And that was not my experience.
Which one would come home? Yeah. Which one would come home and which one,
Yeah, exactly. Like that was not my experience.
With her. Yeah.
Yeah. It just wasn't my experience. But seeing that movie allowed me, even as a kid, to think, well, there are these things I see where some kids are kind of angry and kind of mean and kind of this, but it's because of a situation in their life, and it allowed me to have compassion instead of judgment. And so I think that's a powerful thing. So yeah, thanks for bringing that one up. Donnie, I know you had a couple different movies you were deciding between. Did you narrow it down to one?
I think if I were to narrow it down to one, I think I would have to say, no, I have to narrow it down to two. I'd say The Mask or the Ninja Turtles, like the
all right, this is like the other, which I just want to say, of the two people, just because I love them both so dearly, two of my just closest friends, it doesn't shock me that Heidi picked like this really emotional, like sappy kind of like do this, and Donnie's like, I don't know, Ninja Turtles. All right, why Ninja Turtles? Let's start with Ninja Turtles, which I just want to say Sawyer approves of both of your choices.
Yeah, 100%. Great.
I think movie. It's because like it just has such fond memories for me. Like I remember I remember watching it with the family, and like I remember going through the different what do you call it? Sequels of it too. And like where there was the Ninja Turtle rap, and then there was the action figures, and there was all this idea of like these turtles that look like you were going to see them in real life. And it was like a really cool thing. And
they look better than that CGI one they made later. Like those look like
down.
Realized
like
people. Yeah.
People joke about like how they like the older ones, but I'm like, dude, like there is nothing that compares to them, because when I watch them like dance and do like karate, I actually feel like they're like, it's a movie.
Donnie was Vanilla Ice saying, go ninja, go ninja, go.
That's right. When you break down when Vanilla Ice pops in and it's like, go ninja, and you're like, yeah, it's time to break it down, guys. We got to dance.
There is not much more 90s kid aesthetic than Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie with like the really cheesy pizza,
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, and it was such a good like story of how they were telling it. Like, you got these young kids that are like growing up with this really intelligent, elder who's teaching them how to do life. You know what I'm saying? Like that, yeah. Like looking back at it now, especially, but like for me, I was just enamored with the idea of like, oh, this is so cool. Like these television shows I've watched, because they had, a Ninja Turtles TV show, and they also had the Ninja Turtles game where you had to like, it was the side scroller. So you had to like, it was inside the arcade where you're side scrolling, and you had two buttons, attack and jump. And that was all you
Yeah.
had to do. And you had to save them out of buildings. And oh my gosh, it was so fun.
What about The Mask? Same thing, just kind of fun, comedy.
Oh, just like for me, I think a lot of things that make me excited about, like, especially movies like that are I love quotables.
Yeah.
Anything where you can just like pull from that movie and you can use it in real life. And it was like, it would always be that line of somebody stop me.
Yeah, I think my mom had to ban that movie from our house because I annoyed her so much running through the house going, somebody stop me. And she was like, we're never watching this movie again.
When I was a kid, after I had seen that movie, I think if I found something interesting, I simply called it a spicy meatball, okay? Because of that movie. I was like, that's a spicy meatball.
Oh my gosh. Every time we get insight into your life, I explain so much about you. I'm just like making a list going, I'm handing this to some psychologist. Explain it to me.
Oh my gosh. But like it was one of those movies. Like it was just between those two, like it just has such fun, happy, like fun movies. Because I mean, like growing up, like now, you see a lot more than you ever did when we were growing up.
Yeah.
Like we had movies that were geared specifically to us. We had like shows geared toward us. Like when I go, hey, like this is what I watched growing up. And I'm like, I was watching like Darkwing Duck and all these various other things. And like, what was it? Chip and Dale that's now has its own like, recreated movie, and I'm like, this is what I watched. And they're like, yeah, I was watching this other show. And like, I'm looking at the graphics going, whatever. Like, so what? You got graphics. I had an animated hand-drawn cartoon mouse.
Yep. All good. Donnie now is old man screaming at Sky. Very good. All right. Well, so that's very good. But now I'm really interested because Sawyer didn't want to tell me beforehand. So Sawyer, you got to tell me.
Yeah.
What is your personal movie?
I went with Rocky.
Interesting. All right, why Rocky? I'm gonna guess. Can I guess why this movie is? It's something to do with your dad. Because Rocky is the movie every dude is like, and that's the story behind Creed. I don't know if you know that. That's the story behind.
It's Ryan Coogler grew up watching the Rocky movies with his dad, and then he wanted to basically make one.
No.
So, well, about Apollo. So.
He ended up watching Rocky with his dad. His dad got a chronic illness, and
I didn't know that
watching his dad go through that felt like watching his hero Rocky Balboa go through it.
That.
So he made a movie about Rocky. He said, "Can I make a movie for my dad that's about Rocky getting cancer and kind of this big, strong guy getting really weak and having this?" And then he added all the stuff about Apollo Creed and stuff. But my point in saying all that is I do think Rocky is a movie that makes me think of my dad because my dad loves Rocky. But go ahead, talk about Rocky.
So like when I was a little kid, I was only interested in watching Star Wars, Toy Story, and Lion King. Those were the only things I was interested in watching. And I asked my dad, I was like, Dad, what's your favorite movie? Expecting him to say Empire Strikes Back because I did know that was his favorite Star Wars movie. And he said, my favorite movie is probably Rocky. And I instantly was like, oh, well, I really want to watch that movie. And he was like, I don't know if you'll like it. It's a little bit slow. And I was like, nope, I know I'm going to love it. And I watched it when I was like 6 or 7. I was like, yep, that was boring. But then I watched the second one and I was like, okay, that one was better. I watched the third one with Mr. T and I was like, okay, that one's the best. And then I watched Rocky 4 and I was like, this is the greatest movie I've ever watched in my life. I can't. Sawyer, I was so on board with you. I was so emotional. Every Rocky movie is better than the first. No. Hold on. And then I got to Rocky 5. I was like, okay, something's wrong here. Okay.
It's Chris Tucker all over again.
Yeah. And then I got to Rocky Balboa and I was like, okay, this is good. We're getting back to basics, which I saw Rocky Balboa in the theater. But like that was a big deal for me and my dad. And then I saw the Creed movies with my dad.
Guys, I have to throw in that my dad went and saw that movie because dads love Rocky. But he called it Ricky Balboa.
That's awesome.
That's wonderful.
But I'll never I have this weird relationship with Rocky where like first time I saw it, I thought it was boring. And then like I didn't watch it for like 5 or 6 years. And then when I was 13, I was like, oh, okay, I see it. This is an amazing movie and stuff like that. And I regularly was like, okay, yeah, Rocky's the best one in the franchise and stuff like that. And as I've like gotten older, I don't fully believe that anymore. I do actually think Rocky 2 is slightly better, but Rocky has always been a movie kind of, yeah, like obviously it's me and my dad's movie. Like if I ever want to do something with my dad that involves watching a movie, if I'm just like, Dad, want to watch Rocky? He's going to say yes. And we're going to watch Rocky and it's going to be awesome. And so that's that. Yeah. And that's true with any movie in the franchise, except for Rocky 5. Rocky 5 is absolute garbage, but even Rocky 4, I will go to bat for that movie. Okay. That movie is amazing.
You can always get in the batter's box, but you can always strike out.
No, not with Rocky 4. That movie is amazing. Okay.
So here's what I'll say too, is I think, I don't think I've talked about this, but Creed is almost the movie I talked about here. I think it is one of the most emotional experiences for me on multiple different things. One, the movie just blew me away. I just think it is top notch of the last maybe 10 years, just one of the best movies.
Both of them, Creed and Creed 2.
Yeah, Creed 2 is really good. But I had an experience. I went and saw Creed 3 times in theaters. The second time I went, because I cried every time, especially when he gets to part where like I have to prove, and he goes, prove what? And he goes, that I'm not a mistake. And I'm like, I'm like crying the whole time. So the second time we went to see that movie, I went by myself. And I was like, well, oh man, I really got to use the restroom. I know that moment's coming up. And so we were at the old Carmike Theater here, and the lights didn't work on the stairs. And I was like running down the stairs so I could go to the restroom and get back. And my foot tripped and I tumbled down like 6 stairs and I hit the ground. And some dude at the other end goes, oh, dude, you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. And then I had to like get up and still go to the bathroom. But I was so invested in getting back. I came back to the theater as everyone in the theater just watches me slowly walk back up the stairs, because I had to get back in position to have
they were trying to make sure you made it okay.
I know. I was like, they couldn't see me well. They probably thought I was 70 years old. Like, I tumbled down those stairs at the Carmike, and it was a whole other thing. But yeah, that movie just blew me away. And now my kids love it. My girls love it, especially the second one. Their second one's probably their favorite because there's a baby in it and there's a whole kind of side story with that. But the romance, everything in Creed works. I could talk about Star Trek Wrath of Khan, which is Star Trek 2. That is the movie that made me fall in love with Star Trek, in particular because my mom, who was not much of an emotional person, I've only seen my mom cry maybe 10 times in my life that weren't baptisms. She cried at every baptism, but besides that, she doesn't cry a lot. And she cried like 2 times when we watched that. I watched that movie a few times, and like especially when Spock dies and all that kind of stuff is such a emotional thing for her that it really just inspired me. Oh man, movies can do this. Yeah. So that was a big one. But
that scene gets me as well. Okay, like when Spock dies.
Oh yeah,
like I can be a mess right there.
It's why I can't deal with Star Trek Into Darkness at all, because that gets ruined. It makes me angry. I was angry watching that movie. But I think when you get into the movie that currently in my current family is a big deal is the movie Lilo and Stitch. This is a movie that is about, in particular, has a lot. There's social workers in the movie. Lilo and her sister are taking care of each other, and really just the heart of that movie being that Ohana means family, and family means that nobody gets left behind or forgotten. And I remember watching that movie after our first foster child kind of left our home and just crying, being like, no one gets forgotten, and just like watching that movie. And then even with my own kids, like they really associate with both Lilo and with Stitch, and having that, and just the power of how that kind of draws the kind of truth of love and family. And we're all broken, and we all sometimes we act out. Like Stitch and Lilo both are just chaotic characters, man. They're biting people and they're acting out in bad ways, but it really comes from this desire to just be loved and to know that I'm okay and to know that I'm safe, and all of that I think is just so important. And so it's just a huge deal for me and my family. It's just really personal. But one thing I want to just to kind of tie a bow on all this, and then we'll be done. Because as Donnie said, he was afraid we wouldn't be able to talk for 15 minutes. We've been talking for 50 minutes. So I want us to kind of wrap this whole thing up. And here's what it is. And this is why I wanted us to talk about this. All of us had a wide range of what the movies were, sappy, pay it forward, inspirational film, just lighthearted comedies, inspirational sports dad movies, these kind of animated comedies that are sentimental family movies. All of those things are just these important. What's important about them is that they were things that we did with our families. They're things that were moments that really bonded us, and they were memories that got made. And sometimes those are the things we hold on to. I watch this movie and I think of my mom, or I watch this movie and I think of my dad, or I think about being in the family, and it inspires love within us. It creates this desire for family. The desire is not even for the movie, right? I don't think Donnie is trying to defend that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is the greatest cinematic masterpiece of all time.
What's he talking about, Willis?
Yes, but
I just said I love Rocky IV. Okay, like
yeah,
me and Donnie are in the same boat.
Don't bring that up again. So, but it's this moment where we say, my desire is not for the movie. My desire is for these people. My desire is for that relationship and the love. And I think that's what we want for our kids, is to be able to build those memories and then to be able to tie that to Jesus with meaningful conversations. And we're committed for 50 more episodes. We're going to go forward, and we've got some great things coming up. In about 4 or 5 episodes, we're going to have our Christmas movie episodes, and those are going to be a lot of fun. And I think we're even going to have some episodes that are just designed for you and your spouse to have a date night, because your relationship with your spouse is pivotal for your kids to see that you love one another, and having that base of relationship is so good for your kids. So we've got a lot of good movies coming up, and I'm excited to talk about them with all of you guys, and also with our audience. So we will see you guys next time as we help you have conversations that help your kids love Jesus and his way of life even more. We'll see you then.